Thank you guys for being here. I'm John Ruggi. I'm here with my co-host, Drew Thompson, and welcome to our latest interview in AMA. So look, we had a great time talking with Gabe Higgins a couple of weeks ago. We were talking about the state of Bitcoin in 2022, where things were headed next year. And today we're going to continue that thread by talking to Alex Lewin. He's going to join us and talk about how Bitcoin fits into the Web3 universe. So Alex is one of our Lightning developers at BlockSpaces. And on top of that, he's super knowledgeable and passionate about the Bitcoin space. So he's even a regular speaker and presenter on the topic, and he's got a lot to teach us about how Bitcoin is different from other cryptocurrencies. And we're going to talk about how and why Bitcoin was designed, what role Bitcoin plays in Web3, lots to cover. So Alex, I know I didn't really do your intro justice. So maybe can you just tell us a little bit more about yourself and how you got into Bitcoin and blockchain in the first place?
I think you did just fine, John. Yep, as John mentioned, my name's Alex. Currently, I'm a Lightning developer at BlockSpaces. I first got into blockchain generally like around 2.5 years ago at a company called NCR. And I was a part of their innovation lab and got exposed to a lot of different technologies. And maybe about a year into that job, I found Bitcoin, and I started being exposed to Bitcoin Lightning specifically, and kind of got addicted. And for the past maybe 18 months, I've been exclusively writing code for Bitcoin. I'm really passionate in specifically getting this new technology into the hands of the next billion people, and just seeing that get carried out. So
excited to pick your brain today and learn what you've learned over the years. I need your help demystifying something for us. I hear a lot of people make these very kind of general blanket statements about cryptocurrencies. And when you hear these types of comments, it's often because there's a misunderstanding of what cryptocurrency even is, or a misconception that all cryptocurrency is generally alike, and that these differences are just surface level. You and I know, Drew knows, these things aren't true, but to kind of give us a good foundation for that, let's start with Bitcoin. Can you walk us through why Bitcoin was created, what goals it was trying to achieve, and what design choices that led to? And I think if we can start there, that'll lay a good foundation for understanding how the rest of the Web3 space evolved from there.
Bitcoin was first born in 2008 when an anonymous person going by the pseudonym of Satoshi Nakamoto releases a white paper. Really, it's a blog post, but he wrote a paper describing, as he put it, a solution to digital cash, a solution to digital money. That's how he presented it. He didn't mention the word blockchain or anything like that in the first post. He presented a solution to digital money. Over the past like maybe 10 or 15 years, or actually longer than that, but several years before he posted that, people had attempted and created other attempts at digital cash, but they were incomplete solutions for a few technical reasons. But when Satoshi announced Bitcoin, it was a complete solution to digital cash. So that happened in 2008, and Bitcoin launched in early 2009. It caught a lot of attention over the next few years, but really the Web3 movement hadn't really started yet. It wasn't until around 2015 when Ethereum launches that the Web3 movement spawns. And the reason why it explodes is because with Ethereum, they had this powerhouse feature that wasn't in Bitcoin. And that powerhouse feature was what's called an abstract smart contracting language. What that basically means is that you can apply the core principles of Bitcoin that make it good money. You can apply the core decentralization principles to any abstract use case. So you, as a developer, then you can release applications that you can apply to many different use cases. And this causes this Cambrian explosion of innovation, and you see Web3 and blockchain being applied to a myriad of use cases. And back to your original question, what makes Bitcoin different? Bitcoin focuses on only one use case, and that's being the best money in the world. That's it. That's Bitcoin's value proposition. It's being the best money in the world. All of the other Web3 use cases, while very exciting, Bitcoin doesn't care about those. And it's Bitcoin's view is that if it does the money thing really, really well, better than everybody else, then a lot of the other problems in the world that Web3 is solving may solve themselves. Where this conversation might go is that Bitcoin has a lot. It's very it's fitted for one use case. It's fitted to be money, and it's not that useful for many other things. Like now in a world where we have all these different types of use cases for blockchain, the question is, why do you still need to use Bitcoin when you can do the kind of money thing on this app? If it's abstract, you can do more things. You can also do money. Like, why do you still need the thing that's only money? And the reason is that as you add more use cases, as you add more features and more usability, there's always a trade-off. When you add more features, you're giving something else up, and Bitcoin doesn't give up anything to compromise it from its mission, which is being money.
There's some design choices that were made around Bitcoin that are quite different from what you see in other cryptocurrencies. Some see those design choices maybe as like bugs or shortcomings, but I'm hoping you can unpack for us why some of those are actually like features and were there intentionally for a specific purpose.
So at a high level, there's like 99% of the same DNA across Bitcoin and all the other blockchains. That's honestly not what, unless you get like really deep, it's not super obvious what's different about them. However, they have different characteristics that are definitely observable. Bitcoin is often characterized as being slow, patient, and uncompromising. I've seen like the Web3 world, people call Bitcoin like their pet rock. Oh, it's the same thing that's always been. That's not completely true, but it definitely, while compared to the other projects, Bitcoin is incredibly slow. But on the other side of the fence, you have the quote unquote Web3 world. Also, for the purposes of this conversation, I realize that most people put Bitcoin under the Web3 umbrella, but I'm going to be talking about them as if they're separate. So that's semantics. But on the Web3 side, their goal is to achieve the future of the decentralized internet as fast as possible, cover all the bases and do as many different things as you possibly can, and find all these use cases and get them to market quickly, which is it's a noble pursuit. It's important work. But Bitcoin's view is that as you move quickly, you're making sacrifices. One concrete example of this is if you're going to get a change into Bitcoin, it's a very different process than getting a change into any other piece of technology. With Ethereum, it's much easier. They still have a big process and they still have a lot of people involved, but basically, if you convince the core developers it's a good idea, the change gets in. That's all you need. In Ethereum, there's a voting process of the stakers, but generally they follow the will of the core developers, and this is true for most blockchains and
I think we saw that with the merge. With the Ethereum merge, we saw that, right? I mean, there was a lot of contention, but ultimately the core team decided it was a good idea, and everyone just kind of got in line and followed.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of mining companies that are pretty upset about that.
Yeah,
a lot of mining companies. But there's actually a feature inside of the Ethereum protocol, inside the Ethereum code base, that prevents you from having any other version of Ethereum. Like it forces you, it basically penalizes you from trying to do it yourself, or it makes it basically breaks. They put in something that they call the difficulty bomb, and they make it impossible to run the technology in any other way than is the status quo.
And how does this compare with like Bitcoin and the way Bitcoin works with this stuff?
So Bitcoin takes the exact opposite approach. Let's talk through what it takes to get a change into Bitcoin. There's a several step process. There's about 5 steps. Step 1 of getting a change into Bitcoin is announcing your idea for the change in what's called the Bitcoin mailing list. This is a technical mailing list managed by the Linux Foundation. Anybody can post in it. Anybody can view it and subscribe to it. And this is how you get your idea out into the open. This is like the bat signal, the shouting your idea from the rooftops. Then once people get familiar with your idea, they might have some questions and you'll talk about it. The next step after announcing your idea is reaching what's called technical consensus. Technical consensus is amongst the core developers. Bitcoin's core developer team is pretty different from any other core developer team. Bitcoin's core developers are a group of several hundred people spread out throughout the world, and they all don't like each other. This is different, whereas the Ethereum team, they're incredibly efficient and they work well together, and they can move quickly. The Bitcoiner team, basically everybody has guns pointed to each other's heads, and all the core developers think the other core developers are trying to sabotage Bitcoin, and everybody really cares about Bitcoin, so they want to protect Bitcoin at all costs.
What do you mean by that? Like, do people have different ideas about where Bitcoin should go? Are these like philosophical differences, or are they technical? Like what's driving these like differences among those core developers?
It's really just like the amount of suspicion that's met with a new idea. I'm not to say that it's that easy to get a change into Ethereum. That's not what I'm trying to say. It's just it's a different world. It's like if you get the room of people and if the core developers come up with an idea and they like the idea, it gets into Ethereum. But in Bitcoin, you have to convince everybody at the table. You have to convince all these different parties that don't think differently or that think completely differently, and they won't. I mean, they're uncompromising. And how it works is you can't have a single significant, that they call it like technical knack or technical no acknowledgement, which means like you can't have any dissenters amongst the core developer groups. This is where most proposals die. Like 99% of proposals die at this stage because it's so hard to get all of these people onto the same team. And what that means is Bitcoin doesn't change very often because it's really hard to get people on board. Okay, we've got the technical consensus amongst the core developers. What's next? Now we have to prepare for something called speedy trial. This is another thing that's somewhat unique to Bitcoin. Some other protocols have this, but it's a process where you have to now that you sold the developers create the implementation, that they're ready to release the code. Now you have to convince all the miners. You basically put the core developers prepare a release of the software, and then they set an activation date, and it's usually about 3 months in the future. And now there's a 3-month voting period of where the miners have to vote a change into Bitcoin. And over the course of the 3 months, you have to achieve 95% consensus amongst the miners.
And is this like anyone who's mining, or is there a certain threshold that you have to?
So like similar in like proof of stake environments, the amount of money that you have is represents the number of votes you have. In Bitcoin world and proof of work world, your hash power, the amount of numbers you're crunching is your proportional vote. So you have to convince 95% of the hash power that your idea is good. Okay, so that's speedy trial. It's a fail fast system. If you don't get 95% in 3 months, the proposal dies. Okay, let's say that you convince the core developers, you bribe the miners. What's next? Okay. Well, there's one last fail safe, and that's called the user activated soft fork, big word, UASF. Let's say that you bribe the core developers, you bribe the miners. The users have one last line of defense, and that's when the users of the software distribute a build of the software that doesn't have the change in. They basically reject the change. If they see blocks coming in with that change, they reject those blocks and they fork off and they make their own Bitcoin. This is not possible in other protocols that have like difficulty bombs. So even if you convince everybody that's supposed to be managing Bitcoin, the users have the option to fork off and continue using Bitcoin with the rules that they like.
You mentioned like this very conservative approach to changes versus a very like progressive approach with Ethereum. If I'm thinking of using this maybe in a more like to solve kind of an existing real world problem, maybe in a business, like what are the pros and cons of those two approaches? Like how might I think about their effect on me trying to do something like, again, to solve a problem that I'm trying to get rid of in my business?
So what I tell like my like friends and family that are starting to dabble with like investing is that, and I think the same advice goes to businesses is that when you're dealing with Bitcoin, you're dealing with either digital gold or like the biggest company you can imagine, like a Walmart, so somebody with like the trustworthy rating of Walmart. When you're dealing with anything else, you're angel investing. You're dealing with startups. The upside might be incredible. I mean, from an investing perspective, but also from a business perspective, it might do everything that you need it to do and solve all of your problems, be the silver bullet that you were looking for all along. But there is inherent risk associated with it. When you're dealing with Bitcoin, it's like the only one that isn't gonna implode on you. Okay, I mean that might be too harsh to everything else, but that's kind of the distinction how I think about it. It's like when you're dealing with Bitcoin, you're dealing with something that's established, not just because of like the amount of time, but the nature of the beast is that it's conservative and unchanging.
So how should I think about Bitcoin then? Should I think about Bitcoin as like, should I be waiting for Bitcoin to evolve to where I can solve other things besides that and like solutions built on top of that? Should I understand that there's going to be limitations there and those will always exist? And there's other pieces within the Web3 universe I need to understand and maybe explore because Bitcoin can't do everything and maybe it won't do everything.
I always make people mad when I talk about this, but I suggest that if you're trying to do things like digital real estate or supply chain management or whatever, insert X use case for blockchain that's not payments, you ought to be doing them somewhere other than Bitcoin because Bitcoin doesn't do that. It's not going to do that. It doesn't want to do that. And it's a lie to say that it's going to eventually do it better than everything else. It doesn't yet. And it doesn't look like it's going to anytime soon. So if you're if you really care about those extra use cases, then you should not use Bitcoin. However, a lot of the use cases that you see being explored in the Web3 world probably don't need a blockchain.
One question I had that dovetails with it, this Taro protocol on Bitcoin, allowing for all of these non-Bitcoin assets to be used on Bitcoin. What's your take there? Because it seems like it has an aim or could be used to bring some of these non-money use cases onto Bitcoin, but those wouldn't necessarily be smart contracts in the way that Ethereum has them, right? So what's your take what's your take there on where that fits in?
Anybody that hasn't heard of Taro is a new protocol that was released by a company called Lightning Labs, who contributes to Bitcoin Lightning, like the scaling solution on top of Bitcoin. And their proposal allows you to create what's called arbitrary assets on top of Bitcoin. And these assets can be like a foreign currency, a stable coin, or even like NFTs, like tickets or baseball cards or whatever. I think it's too early to tell. They have released some code. It has not launched in the mainnet. I think some people are being overly optimistic. I think at least the stable coins are going to be very interesting. We'll see about everything else. Okay, another like common like counterpoint that I get from like a lot of people talking about Bitcoin being money. People say, well, it's not backed by anything. I mean, I'm sure you guys have heard this talking to people. It's like, well, how can you trust it if it's not backed by something? Dollars, you'd think that they're backed by gold, but if they're not backed by gold, but at least they're backed by the government saying that they're worth something. Well, we can kind of unpack what that means. Like, what does it mean by backed by something? Like, why is it important to be backed by gold? Well, people say, well, gold has value. Well, why does gold have value?
We all agreed. There's some unspoken agreement, like culturally, like we agreed that it had value.
Did we just wake up one day and agree? Like, what do you think made gold valuable? My argument is that the reason why we care about gold is because you can't fake the gold that I have. If I have gold, I can prove to you, you can't devalue that gold. It measures, if everybody is competing against in the same competition of who can get the most gold, it's going to be a fair fight. And that same property applies to Bitcoin. It's the idea that, you can't cheat the system, you can't print more. And if somebody has Bitcoin, then you know that they had to get it through legitimate means.
Alex, do you see any crossover between Bitcoin and other Web3 technologies?
Maybe not crossover exactly, but I definitely see other Web3 technologies using Bitcoin for what it's good at. Maybe not the other way around, but definitely that there are many Web3 technologies that are using Bitcoin to be the digital gold of their platform. So yeah, yes and no. You're not going to see like Bitcoin embracing any other Web3 technologies, but however, I mean, there's other Web3 things in Web3 like, like Stacks is probably the biggest example of a protocol that uses Bitcoin to accomplish other things on a different protocol.
Like that pet rock analogy you were using earlier, that's almost where you could flip that and make that into a feature. Yeah, you gain the understanding and that takes time, but it's also not going to change on you every week. And you're not having to I would assume that time you'd have to commit to keeping track of those changes would be less with Bitcoin because there is that level of stability there.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Two sides of the same coin. It's like you want to move quickly and to progress and innovate, but there's a cost to that. Like in the web development world, there was like a spout of like 10 years of where there was like a new web framework coming out like every 6 months. So every 6 months you were like rewriting your website and there's this nightmarish reality of trying to just keep up with what's hot and what's new. There's a serious cost to innovation, and that's getting everybody to upgrade. Definitely, it could be viewed as a feature, could be viewed as a bug. Bitcoiners view it as a feature, but I mean, obviously, there's a lot of virtue in innovation. So
over the next 5 or so years, where do you see the Web3, not just Bitcoin specifically, but just the entire Web3/Bitcoin? Where do you see it all going over the next few years?
Oh, well, funny you ask. A good thing I have my crystal ball right here and I can look at it. I mean, nobody knows for sure. Okay. If there's one answer, it's these application specific blockchains, or like if I'm going to make a music blockchain I think those are going to fall out of vogue, and people are going to settle on these more shared, abstract decentralization technologies, and they're going to move everything that they possibly can off the blockchain. Blockchains are expensive and they're difficult to use. That they're not the silver bullet. They solve a serious problem, which is decentralization, but they're not the silver bullet. So
Alex, what should someone do today if they want to start learning how to invest in Bitcoin?
The best thing you can do is buy $10. Just put down $10 and buy some Bitcoin. Maybe a bit more steps what you can do. You should buy a hardware wallet, buy like a Trezor or a Ledger.
100%.
And then go through the process of purchasing 10, 20, $50 on an exchange and actually go through the process of sending it from the exchange to your cold storage wallet. If you can get through all of those steps, you're going to be more savvy than 90% of the people out there.
Well, I think that's about all the time we have. Thanks to all of you who asked some questions. Alex, if someone wants to get in touch with you, maybe ask a follow-up question, what's the best way for them to do that?
Probably Twitter. That's my preferred social media these days. You can follow me at _Alex Lewin, all one word. So _Alex Lewin. I can try to find the chat.
LEWIN, right?
Yep. It's Matt_Alex Lewin.
All right. Well, thank you, Alex. Great to have you here. Thanks to all of you who were able to join us today. Appreciate you being here. Enjoy the rest of your week, and we will see you next time we do one of these.
Thanks for joining.